In a Violent Nature is a slasher like you've never seen before.
I'm not gonna ask you again. You stay out of that park. But one of these days, you're gonna find something that's gonna walk right through your traps. Trust me, you don't want to find that animal.
In a Violent Nature comes from Canadian director Chris Nash, and it is a complete subversion of the classic slasher film. Obviously, there is a lot that Nash is paying tribute to here, but he's approaching it in a wholly unique way. Essentially, the vast majority of the film, everything in the first two acts at the very least, is shot from the point of view of the killer himself. We see the killer's slow and methodical journey through the woods, almost like an apex predator stalking its prey. We still get those classic slasher kills, but the tension isn't built from the other characters' perspectives trying to get away from this killer. It comes from the slow, haunting steps of the killer himself. This film premiered at the Sundance Film Festival and has been playing at some other festivals around the world, but it is currently out on a limited theatrical release before coming to Shudder, probably at the end of June, although an official date hasn't been announced yet. I was fortunate enough to be able to chat with Nash about this project, and it was a really interesting conversation. I started off by just asking him if it was difficult to get this project made. As I mentioned, it goes against the grain in terms of the point of view, but that's not all. It's shot in a 4:3 aspect ratio that kind of emulates those straight-to-video movies from years past, and it has no musical score. These two areas are, again, unique, but you would think would make it more difficult for this project to get made. But as we can hear from Nash himself, he was very fortunate with the production team that he had around him.
There was a lot of things that we thought we were going to brush up against. Like within the inception of the actual film, we were like, okay, well, we want to shoot it 4:3, and the reason that we wanted to shoot it in a 4:3 aspect ratio was trying to, like, you type into all these slasher tropes and all, like, you know, essentially really getting the feel of like how I felt watching like the Friday movies as a kid. It's like we didn't watch them in widescreen in 4K. Yeah. We watched them on a crappy VHS on a CRT TV. With color all over the place, and everything's kind of like way too green. And we're like, okay, but also we don't want to have a musical score. And then it's like, yeah, sure, whatever you're feeling, go for it.
And as you can hear from Nash himself, these interesting choices that he knew he was going to make really elevate the film to something else entirely. It is a slasher picture, yes, of course, but it has the feeling and the pacing of a slow art house picture. We spend a lot of time with the killer, Johnny, as he tracks his victims. And we are literally tracking Johnny with the camera. And it might become monotonous for some, but the way that I frame it is we're watching almost like a nature documentary unfold, and we have to sit quietly at attention because we don't know exactly when the action's going to occur. Beyond the pacing and these tracking shots, the lack of a score also contributes to this art house feel. Nash incorporates a wide array of very interesting shots, kind of bucking traditional trends or going against the basics, the fundamentals that you're taught in kind of introductory cinematography courses. He's willing to take risks, and I think that most of these choices do work out when it comes to the framing. Sometimes characters are pushed to the edge of the frame, and we have these slow and subtle creeps across, little shifts in movement, which makes sense when we consider that a lot of the film is kind of through the point of view of the killer. We have this one scene where the camera essentially circles a group of 20-somethings around the campfire having a good time drinking, the classic slasher tropes there, but the camera circles them slowly, kind of like this predator circling its prey. And while the final product looks really beautiful and the pre-production process was essentially painless, the same can't be said for the production itself. Approximately 70% of this film was reshot, which is pretty wild to think of. There were a few things that happened. The lead actor playing the killer unfortunately had a medical emergency and could not complete the film, so Nash had to recast after already essentially shooting the entire project or close to. And initially he didn't think that this would be a huge problem, but he realized that the minutia of the movements, just the gait, the slight differences in the physicality of the character made all the difference, and they had to reshoot. Beyond that, they lost their original DP, director of photography, for this reshoot, and Nash's good friend Pierce Dirks had to step in as cinematographer. Dirks was already working on the project, but not in this role. So we have a new actor, we have a new DP, and this new DP, Dirks, used all new cameras as well. So we essentially have an entire movie filmed twice. And Nash was able to shine a little bit of light on this process.
We did 4 weeks of shooting in a completely different location with a different lead actor. He's in a costume the entire film. If we can find somebody the same size, same build, roughly, then we could get away with doing this. But there are so many things with the performance that are important in just like how they carry themselves, the gait of their walk, just like the weight of their footfalls. All of that mattered so much, and we didn't realize how much that mattered until we did a rough assembly of those first 4 weeks, and we could see the stark differences. Perhaps a more selfish reason, but I'd always envisioned this to be shot in Northern Ontario using that kind of wilderness. That's where I'm from, and that's where I, like, in my brain, I set a lot of any project that I do. And where we were shooting, it just didn't have the same feel. The trees didn't feel the same. Everything kind of just felt different and a little too uncanny for what I wanted. So having the opportunity to like reshoot again, I was very adamant with my producing partners that like I would love to go back to my hometown and just call in every favor I can from every friend and family member, because it's not like we had the same budget to work with.
Fortunately, again, everything worked out in the end, but it could have been a very different film. There were some things that Nash wanted to do that either they ran out of time or money for, and in fact, most significant out of all of these was the ending. The ending is probably going to be a bit divisive. You might enjoy it because, again, it goes against expectations, but it could also be disappointing to some for those same reasons. The original ending was supposed to be very grand, but it ended up being quite soft and slow. I won't get into specific spoilers, but Nash talked to me a little bit more about what he planned for the ending and how maybe it came together in the best way.
So there's a death that happens like on a lake, and originally that was conceived as being like a much more elaborate shot where we're having a camera travel over top of the water and everything's like one big unbroken take. And logistically, there were just way too many issues with that. We kept making concessions and we kept attempting, and things were going wrong, like one after another, until it got to the point where like we still needed to fill this space in the film. We had attempted to shoot it many times, all to failure. And then we were just like, okay, well, we'll just have to like go very, very minimalist with this, and just lock off the camera in like one corner and shoot it like much differently than we originally conceived, but still just something needs to happen. We need to have the impression, like we still need to have this like set piece happen, but like it made us re-examine like what the film is and what the tone is, and like even just thinking back at it, like that original conception of like how we were going to shoot that scene was just so like creatively masturbatory from like a directing standpoint of like, what are you doing? You're like, you might as well just be pointing the camera at yourself at this point to like to, like going like, see what I did? This is really cool, right? Yeah, I thought so too. That's why I filmed it this way. And and so there were things like that where it was like, oh no, it helps the film. It helps the film that things didn't go right. And originally the ending was supposed to be completely different. It was supposed to be a giant set piece with like buildings lit on fire and just death and carnage going around, and that was proving to be a lot to handle too. And it was just a lot of there was a lot of things going wrong. It was proving to be very difficult, and time was running out, and things were getting stressful. And I was speaking with one of my friends who is also like an incredibly talented filmmaker, Nate Wilson, and he's like, well, do you have any other ideas that you might want to end it? And I was just so frustrated. I was just like, yeah, maybe you should just like kind of like end this way, in like a very like unceremonious but like mean and aggressive and even kind of a funny way, and just like have the ending be something that people don't expect, and not tied up in a nice bow like everybody wants it to be. So yeah, all these things that didn't go right, like there's a reason they didn't go right. This is cosmic milieu in the universe that knows what's supposed to happen and what isn't. So you just gotta keep trying, but it'll figure itself out.
At the end of the day, the ending to In a Violent Nature is kind of just a microcosm of the film itself. Some people are going to absolutely love it for the risks that it takes, how it subverts our expectations, but it just might not work for some folks. It's slow and methodical and might not be what people are looking for if they just quickly read the logline. That being said, it certainly will work for a couple groups of people. First of all, if you are a fan of traditional slashers, I think there's still enough here for you. The first couple kills are so-so, but then we get some extremely creative, inventive, gruesome kills that were some of the best that I can recall in recent memory. My personal favorite was, again, without going into spoilers, you could say the lookout scene that had me with my mouth agape for what seemed like minutes. If you're not necessarily a huge slasher person, but you are just a lover of film, you're a cinephile, you maybe are into art house pictures or an ambient slasher as Nash described this, I also think that you'll really enjoy it. There are some very creative choices, both visually and otherwise, and there is a lot to discuss. If you don't fit into either of those camps, then, well, there's a pretty good chance that it might not work for you, and that's okay. In the end, this is a unique venture of subversion of traditional slasher pictures, and I'm so happy that it was made and that it's being seen. As mentioned earlier, it's playing in theaters right now, but will be available to stream on Shudder, hopefully by the end of June, although a specific date has not been announced. If you watched this whole video, appreciate it, I really do. If you don't mind giving it a like, or throwing a comment down, or subscribing if you haven't, I am told by the algorithm that these things are helpful to me. So when the next one comes out, you can watch that one too. Cheers.